When people think about the fall of Rome, they often picture barbarians breaching the gates, legions falling apart, or emperors being poisoned in marble palaces. But empires don't collapse from external pressure alone. They decay from the inside. And one of the most destructive forces in that decay is always money. Rome didn't fall only because of invasions or corruption. It fell because its monetary system broke down. And the lessons from that breakdown still apply to every modern economy that believes it can manipulate money without consequences. So let's set the scene. For hundreds of years, the silver denarius formed the foundation of Rome's economy. Introduced around 211 BC, it was struck with almost pure silver and widely trusted both within the empire and far beyond its borders. Roman soldiers received their pay in it, traders insisted on it, and everyday citizens saved their wealth with it. The denarius was more than a medium of exchange. It embodied trust itself, cast in metal. The strength of the empire and the worth of the coin were inseparable. As long as faith in Rome endured, so did faith in its currency. But maintaining an empire comes at a high cost. Armies needed regular pay, roads and aqueducts had to be constructed, and constant wars required funding. By the 2nd century AD, Rome was overstretched, guarding its frontiers against Germanic tribes, facing the Parthians in the east and dealing with internal instability. Tax income could no longer match the rising expense of the military. So, emperors resorted to a familiar tactic: debasement. Rather than increasing taxes, a move guaranteed to anger the population, they lowered the amount of silver in the denarius. The figures themselves make the point clear. During the reign of Emperor Augustus, at the beginning of the empire, the denarius was composed of roughly 95% silver. By the early 3rd century under Caracalla, that share had fallen to about half. And by the mid-3rd century, during the rule of Emperor Gallienus, silver made up less than 5% of the coin. What had once been a solid silver currency was reduced to a bronze piece thinly coated with a layer of silver. People could both see and experience the change firsthand. Inflation set in as the currency lost its connection to real value. Goods that once sold for a single denarius, like a measure of wheat, could suddenly cost many times more. This wasn't an abstract economic idea. It had real consequences for everyday Romans. As living costs surged, soldiers began demanding higher wages just to keep up. Traders began refusing debased coins, choosing barter instead, or insisting on payment in gold. As trust in the currency disappeared, local economies slipped back into direct exchange because money itself was no longer reliable. And as confidence continued to fade, emperors responded by minting even cheaper coins, hoping that quantity could make up for lost value. It became a downward spiral. The same pattern seen in countless inflationary crises throughout history. The situation reached its breaking point during what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. From 235 to 284 AD, Rome endured nearly 5 decades of turmoil marked by invasions, epidemics, civil wars, and economic breakdown. Emperors came to power and were overthrown with alarming frequency, sometimes ruling for only a few months before meeting assassination. Beneath this political chaos lay a shattered financial system. Taxes were collected in coins that steadily lost their value. Rather than pay, many farmers abandoned their fields. Trade routes and commercial networks broke down. In response, the Roman state resorted to increasingly desperate policies, including price ceilings and compulsory labor, in an attempt to hold the system together. None of these efforts succeeded. One ruler, Diocletian, made a final attempt to halt the collapse. In 301 AD, Diocletian issued the Edict on Maximum Prices, setting fixed prices for more than 1,000 goods and services, from food staples to wages. Those who broke the rules faced execution. The policy proved disastrous. When a currency has lost its value, no decree can force prices to behave. Black markets rapidly expanded and official commerce nearly disappeared. People quickly realized that laws could not repair a debased coin. In time, Rome abandoned the denarius entirely. Around 312 AD, Constantine the Great introduced the solidus, a gold coin with reliable purity. This reform brought a measure of stability and endured for centuries in the Eastern Roman, or Byzantine, Empire. But by then, the Western Empire had already been weakened beyond recovery. The steady debasement of the denarius had eaten away at the heart of Rome's economy. The state could no longer reliably support its armies. Trade systems had collapsed and public trust had vanished.
Rome's decline was not a sudden moment, but a prolonged unraveling, and the breakdown of its currency was one of the most destructive strands in that process. So what lesson does this hold for us today? It shows that when money is destroyed, empires are undermined as well. Rome believed it could deceive its population by circulating coins that looked unchanged while containing far less real value. Modern states believe they can follow a similar path by printing money, steering interest rates, or eroding debt through inflation. Yet the result is always familiar. Citizens bear the burden, wealth evaporates, and confidence in the system disappears. Rome learned this truth through painful experience, and if we choose to overlook it, we will repeat it ourselves. History did not stop offering warnings after Rome fell. Every major inflationary episode since then has followed the same script. Governments weaken their currency to finance themselves, the powerful shield their wealth with tangible assets, and ordinary people are left impoverished. The Roman monetary breakdown stands as the first large-scale case, a model of how collapse unfolds. Move ahead to the 20th century, and the parallels are striking. After World War I, Germany was burdened with severe reparations imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. To meet these obligations, the government resorted to printing marks, believing it could mask debt the same way Rome had once minted more coins. By 1923, hyperinflation had spiraled out of control. Bread that cost a single mark before the war was priced at more than 200 billion marks by the autumn of that year. Workers hauled their wages home in wheelbarrows. Retirees watched their lifetime savings vanish, leaving many to starve. And just as in ancient Rome, debtors saw their obligations erased by inflation, while those holding real assets, land, factories, or foreign currencies, came out ahead. Money lost all meaning, and the resulting economic misery fed political radicalism, paving the way for Hitler's rise. Zimbabwe followed a similar course in the early 2000s. Confronted with land seizures, declining output, and mounting debt, the government resorted to printing money. By 2008, inflation had reached staggering extremes, with an annual rate of 89.7 sextillion %. Prices were doubling daily. Stores couldn't update price tags quickly enough. In the end, Zimbabwe abandoned its own currency, forcing citizens to rely on US dollars or South African rand. Once again, a government believed it could bend reality. Once again, ordinary people bore the cost. But this pattern isn't limited to the most dramatic cases. Even in advanced modern economies, the Roman cycle persists. Take the United States as an example. In 1971, President Richard Nixon removed the dollar from the gold standard, cutting the final tie between money and a tangible backing. From that point on, the dollar became what economists describe as a fiat currency, supported not by gold, but by confidence in the state. And, much like in Rome, the urge to spend beyond actual resources became impossible to resist. In the decades that followed, government debt swelled, the money supply grew, and inflation settled in as a persistent force. We may not be pushing wheelbarrows of cash, but purchasing power has steadily declined. $1 in 1971 bought what now requires more than $6. The coins appear unchanged. The bills look familiar. Yet their real worth has been steadily drained away. The method never changes. Governments rebrand inflation as economic growth. They assure people that higher paychecks signal prosperity, even as living expenses climb even faster. They frame debt as productive investment, even when it merely finances spending. They highlight soaring stock markets as evidence of growing wealth, despite the fact that most people own little, if any, stock. Like the emperors of Rome, they act as though nothing essential has changed, while silently siphoning value from every coin, every bill, and every paycheck. What makes the situation more dangerous today is its global reach. Rome's downfall was an imperial crisis. Weimar's hyperinflation was confined to a single nation. Zimbabwe's collapse was regional. Today, however, the entire global system runs on fiat money, enormous levels of debt, and central banks prepared to create trillions at the first hint of trouble. That means the next breakdown is unlikely to be limited to a single empire or nation. Its effects would spread worldwide. And if history teaches anything, it's that the burden will not fall on elites holding real assets, but on the millions who depend on wages, pensions, and savings tied to increasingly unstable currencies. So what lesson should you personally draw from Rome's monetary collapse? Start with this. Inflation is not a mistake. It is a deliberate policy. It is a quiet levy that has undermined empires for 2 millennia.
Second, understand that true wealth does not live in paper notes or digital numbers, but in things that retain worth when money fails: land, skills, productive enterprises, and natural resources. Third, never believe that stability will last forever. Romans in the first century would have laughed at the suggestion that their coins might one day be worthless. Germans in 1913 would have dismissed the notion of hauling wages in wheelbarrows. Zimbabweans in the 1980s believed independence would guarantee prosperity, and yet every time the same pattern played out. Rome's downfall shows that financial systems often fail gradually and then all at once, as confidence disappears. When money loses its substance, the social order begins to come apart. Agreements stop working, commerce falters, armies weaken, and states lose their authority. Invaders at the gates may deliver the final blow, but the true cause is almost always found in the treasury itself. And the final message is this: history may not repeat word for word, but if you fail to understand it, it will still break you just the same. The Roman monetary collapse wasn't simply the result of incompetent rulers or self-interested elites. It revealed how vulnerable money becomes when those in power misuse it. That vulnerability has never disappeared. If this offered you a fresh way of seeing things, consider subscribing. History holds the clues, and I'll help you uncover them.